Hey, welcome to Don't Listen to Me. I'm your host, Matt Patrick. On this podcast, the whole premise is you should not listen to me. I am not an expert in anything, but I love bringing on my friends who are more talented and experts at things that I am definitely not an expert in. Today, I'll be interviewing my good friend, Eddie Williams. I'm excited to have him on the podcast. But before we get there, I wanted to make sure that you know that you can catch this on iTunes as well as YouTube. Afterwards, we edit it down. And so we'd appreciate you subscribing, doing all that stuff, sharing it on social media, all of that good stuff. So if you could do that, that would help us out immensely in doing that and getting the word out about this show. Like I said, I've got Eddie Williams here on the podcast with me today. Eddie, you're in the Bay Area, right?
That's correct. San Francisco.
Right. San Francisco. So it's good to have you on here. We're gonna talk primarily about a new, I guess you'd call it a platform and business that you've launched on physical fitness, but I'm sure we'll get into plenty of other stuff. But before we go there, let's chat a little bit. I know you a little bit. We don't know each other super well. We have connections through Fellowship Associates and Acts 29 and the church world, but fill people in. Who's Eddie Williams? Who are you?
No, man, I appreciate you having me on. Yeah, I mean, my story is not a simple one. Grew up here in the Bay Area and grew up in a single parent home. My dad left when I was young and wasn't a Christian, didn't know Jesus, and kind of bounced around the Bay Area all over the place, Section 8 housing, and lost my mom at a young age as well. She passed away of cancer. And so moved with a distant family member, another place in the Bay Area. And, by all accounts, things kind of straightened themselves out. And I was a big 13-year-old, so I was 6'2", 200 pounds, and as a 13-year-old, I didn't grow any taller, much to my dismay, but I did get wider. So
would you say you peaked too early, Eddie?
Yeah, it might have been all the hormones and all the milk. You know what I mean? And the antibiotics. Yeah, so drinking gallons and gallons of milk and orange juice, but. And then went to college at University of Idaho, got a football scholarship to go play football there. And that's where I met Jesus. Guy handed me a Bible, getting on the team bus, and I read it. No youth group experience, no worship concert, nothing like that. Just, reading the Bible. And got saved just reading it in my dorm. And from then on, it was just kind of a rapid transformation, wanting to learn more about Jesus. And, if I'm honest with you, it kind of threw a wrench in my gears a little bit. I was planning on going to the NFL, which every 18-year-old college football player thinks they're going to the NFL. Mm-hmm. I was no different, but it kind of threw it because I didn't know how to handle this humility aspect of Christ with like trying to just be an arrogant chip on my shoulder football player. I didn't know how to balance that. And so, I was able to still get to go to the NFL. I tore my ACL my last game in college and still got drafted. And played 5 years for 4 teams. So I had a pretty prototypical NFL career and spent most of my time with the Cleveland Browns, although some of the Seahawks, and drafted by the Redskins. So good times there as well. Married my wife, got 3 kids, and we live back in San Francisco. And then the way we know each other is, we went through I don't know what they call it, but a finishing school, Fellowship Associates in Little Rock, and got to spend some time there growing because I planted a church in San Francisco 2 years ago called Bay City. And before I launched that church, I was going through Fellowship Associates and really don't know how I'd be a pastor if it wasn't for FA. And that's kind of how our paths crossed.
Yeah, man. Yeah, FA is a beautiful thing. But, I've got, I don't think we've ever talked about this, but I think my wife told me we had dinner with you guys at an Acts 29 thing. And I was sitting there and my wife asked like, oh, who's Eddie and his wife? I think our wives actually hit it off pretty good that night. But I was like, oh yeah. He went to FA, played football. She goes, where? And I go, well, he played for the Browns. And she goes, you're not allowed to talk about that at dinner because my mom works for the Cincinnati Bengals.
Oh.
I know, right?
That's amazing.
So I grew up around the Bengals. She's like, you're not allowed to start trash talking. And I'm pretty sure he could just kill you, which is totally true.
Well, if it makes you feel better, we didn't win a ton of games playing for the Browns. Naturally, I think most people understand that. But when we did win, it was usually against the Bengals.
That's fair. I'll take it. Oh man, the plight of being an Ohio sports team. But
You
it
are
is what it
any
is.
team. Yeah, it's bad. It's cold and there's no steel anymore, and
Yeah.
it's a sad place.
Oh man. Well, hey, let's dive in. Let's chat about some stuff more important than football, because we don't even know if we're going to get football this year. Who knows what's going to go down there? But yeah,
Seriously.
how are you? How are you holding up, man? You've got COVID. There's clearly a ton of tension on the racial front in our nation and within our churches right now. How are you
Mhm.
hanging in there?
It's been an odd season for everybody. I think the thing that allows me to keep going is just to know that everyone's kind of going through this. I'm not alone in the sense that everyone is sheltering in place, or at least was sheltering in place, and
Mm.
and everyone was having their jobs disrupted, and everyone's having family strife, being stuck in the home, things like that. And then on top of that, I guess the next piece of that with George Floyd and the protests and the conversation around police brutality has been really exhausting, I think, for a lot of my black friends, black pastor friends. I think a lot of us are just kind of worn out because the conversations, you want to lead well, you want to make sure you're helping your people, but you're going to
Hmm.
also have family and friends that are wanting to have these conversations, and so a little bit of it's just kind of exhausting. It's more, that's not to say I'm a victim. It's just it's more exhausting to see people continually be killed, and so that's another thing. And so you want to compound that with coronavirus, and then coronavirus kind of disappeared for 2 weeks while we
Yeah.
sorted out race relations. Yeah, I saw something that says the Patriots blew the Falcons blew the 28-3 lead
Yeah.
to the Patriots. It says coronavirus blew a 28-3 lead to racism. That's what
Yeah.
it felt like for a while. So nonetheless, yeah, it was just a kind of compounding situation, man, and it's overwhelming.
Yep.
Looking for the silver lining and allowing God to somehow work. I'm praying that there's renewal
Mm.
in cities around the nation when we all kind of realize we don't really have much left. Once the kind of the cultural tide goes back, all we've got
Yeah.
left is kind of Jesus. So
For sure, man. Yeah, and if you're watching and you got any questions for me or Eddie, you can actually throw them in the comments and they'll show up on our screens here, and we'll do our best to get to them. But the rule is only if they're good questions, because I don't buy into the thing. There's no such thing as a bad question. There's bad questions, but if you got some, throw them in there. We'll do our best to get to them. Yeah, it's interesting, Eddie, what you say there. I don't know exactly what your experience in something like Fellowship Associates, we talked about that was, but I know mine as a pastor is a very eye-opening experience in many levels. But one of those was in regards to race, and particularly to pastors who are leading churches and sitting with my fellow African American brothers that are pastors, and just kind of the regular navigation of tension and all that goes into it, that how it's even more amplified for so many of them. I was with Brandon Washington in my residency, and we had some really great conversations. And so I feel really blessed that I was given a safe place to sit around and discuss those kinds of things. I don't think a lot of other pastors have had that opportunity. I don't know. What do you think about that?
yeah, especially if the conversations you have with pastors are typically done in relationship, and pastors, I like to think are different in the sense that got a closer spiritual connection, or at least try to have a closer spiritual connection with the Lord.
Hmm.
But oftentimes the conversations you have are done with people, and
Yeah.
it's the same as true. And as a CEO, the people on your board are people you have to trust. So
Yeah.
if you don't have people you trust that have different socioeconomic background or race, then you don't know how to have those conversations. And the people that I get calls from, I'm shocked to find like I'm the lone black friend of this guy that I haven't seen for 9 years. And so they're calling me
Wow.
and they're saying, "Hey, do you want to have a conversation?" And my first thing is, well, don't you know anybody else? Like, we haven't had a conversation in 9 years. I'm happy to have that conversation with you,
Yeah.
but you don't know me that well anymore, and I don't know you that well, and maybe
Mm.
that's part of the issue. So I don't know
Yeah.
if pastors have been able to do that, quite honestly. I
Yeah.
think some have, but I'm not sure not all of them have.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, that's a good point, because yeah, I guess your circles play into that, and obviously I want to get into many other things with you on here. Well, one of my fears has been, as a white male pastor, in Boulder, Colorado. Like you don't get any more white than that. Like I can be straight about that. Like, right. Like it just is what
Sure.
it is,
Hmm.
and those kinds of things is I go, man, I'm worn out as a pastor with all this. I feel exhausted and needing to take care of my soul as I lament and mourn uh, so many of the things that are going on, and trying to lead the church that I lead in a healthy, beneficial way, and a lot of times just missing it and sometimes getting it right, But I can't. I honestly can't imagine what it would be like to be an African American pastor, then all of a sudden having everybody going like, "Hey, will you do a panel with me? Will you discuss this
Yeah.
with me? Will you like?" That was even like I talked to you, I think, right when all this stuff happened. I was like, "Hey, you want to hop on here?" But it really was I wanted to talk physical fitness, and so I was like, "Man, I just don't want people thinking like,
Hmm.
oh, you just now we're giving African American brothers and sisters
Hmm.
platforms." Because of what's going on, I think there needs to be a consistency there,
Hmm.
and not just all of a sudden when it's trendy.
Oh yeah.
So that's a tension that I've been wrestling with.
No, I hear you, and it's true. There are countless panels. In fact, I've been invited to so many Zoom panels, which I mean, goodness gracious, how many Zoom panels can you do in a day? But or even just watch. They're just overwhelming, and some of them are, obviously, I think maybe mostly all of them could be helpful, but there is so many. There does have to be a sense in which we begin to say, who are my friends in my life? How can I make my
Mm,
friends make it so my friends don't all look like me and all don't make the same amount of money as me and live culturally
mm,
different than I do, and begin to press into
yeah.
uncomfortable relationships. One of the things we like to say at our church is we want to be intentionally uncomfortable. And we do that, we put
Mm,
ourselves in those situations so that eventually we work towards a space where, hey, it's not so uncomfortable for me to be in a different context. Like if I'm a white person doing time in black spaces or a Latino person doing time in Asian spaces, that's not foreign to me any longer. So if we can press into that, then we will get to a point where it's not weird to, we're not looking to reach for our black friends, brothers and sisters, trying to bring them on panels. We might actually be able to call one of our buddies, like you called Brandon, because you know Brandon through Fellowship Associates. So that's kind of
yeah.
the goal. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah. And I feel like I want to remind people that, hey, we're Christians, and I'm sure there's people watching that aren't, but we do have the most powerful book that guides us and how to do these things. And we have the power of the Holy Spirit to guide us and convict us where need be. And so I saw, I can't remember who it was an Acts 29 pastor, and I thought it was great. And he said, man, these conversations happen so much better on the front porch instead of online, you
Amen.
know, and
Amen.
it seems like because of COVID, it's like, man, it's even harder to accomplish that. And so, man,
Hmm.
my prayer for the church right now is that we would be honest, upfront, direct, but also very gracious with one another as we navigate things. And so, man, I'm praying for you. I appreciate you. And so I promise
Honor.
I will not ask you to hop on a Zoom panel with my church.
Hey man, if you need it, I'm there for you.
All right.
I'll
I
do it.
appreciate.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, actually, something we're doing tonight. I'm doing a Theology on Tap live with one of our other pastors on civil disobedience, which
Nice.
I'm scared. I'll be straight. I'm scared. But and then
Sure.
on July 9th, we are doing a panel. But we actually asked people of color from our church, our local church, because one of my big convictions
Yeah.
is as a pastor, my call is to shepherd the flock among me. And
Hmm.
so I want to hear from the people in my community, and I want
Right.
people in our community hear from them, and so
It's
that's
good.
where just trying to figure it out, man. So,
That's good. That's a great way to
yeah.
do it. Yeah, and it's easy to go ask, maybe a notable person, but to bring your own people in, and then those conversations are going to be had, you know, outside of the panel now, because those people are scattered within your church. That's a great idea.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, hey, let's shift gears a little bit here, and I want to hear. I want you to share, because a lot of the people who have been subscribing and emailing and stuff have been prospective church planters, people who are
Oh,
thinking about
all
planting
right.
churches and stuff. And so,
Yeah.
how many years in are you right now?
Our church is 2 years old, so we're brand spanking new. Paint's still drying on the walls, but man, it feels like it's been a decade, right? Like we launched, about 2 years ago, but the planting process is was another 18 to 24 months of just working and meeting in small groups or city groups and working our way towards it. So it feels like it's been a lot longer, but it hasn't been all that long. But I've been in church. We've helped plant 3 other churches, me and my wife. So we kind of understand a little bit about church planting as well. So
cool. Yeah. So I mean, guys are looking down the barrel of COVID-19 and all that's going on in their world. They're going like, man, I still want the gospel to go forward. I still see the need for more churches that love Jesus well and represent him in the community, probably now more than ever.
Yeah.
I've been wrestling with this, and I really don't have an answer, and maybe you don't either, but guys been going like, should I move forward with planting a church? And I'm like, man, that's a tough question.
You're right. If I was me, if I was the one doing it,
yeah,
I would say, I would think it'd be prudent to be patient and to see if you haven't moved, if you haven't started, taking out money and doing stuff with it. I would be patient and wait, because we just don't know what's going to happen here, right? And there's just too much uncertainty, and you don't want to have a false start and then kind of blow momentum. And so, for us, when it comes to our church, being in San Francisco is very stringent in terms of lockdown and all of that. Like, I feel like we don't even want to restart our church until it's momentous for us. Like, we don't want to go out and then not gain momentum and then fall flat, because we're just at such a fragile state. So if I was a church planner, I would probably be prudent and just wait and see. I know I've been a church planner. I understand what it's like. You want to get out there, you want to go, you want to get started. But quite honestly, like, you don't want to get started and then all of a sudden have to shut down. We've had that. Like, we had a guy in our city launch March 8th. The city shuts down March 11th.
Oh my
gosh. Momentum all gone. We had another guy launch in February. He's going to relaunch his church because 60% of those people that come on launch Sunday, you don't even have a way to contact them. So just be patient and wait. I think if you're already in the process and you're already kind of going, you may kind of have to just, maybe it's like you stretch things out, but you're already in that phase. But we can't even, we're just now being able to meet in small groups with Masson. We just don't know. So my advice is be patient as best you can. If you have your house on the market, pull it down. Just be patient.
Yeah, man, it's such a wild world out there. I had a meeting this morning with we have what we call our executive team, and our new budget year starts July 1. And we were just sitting in this budget meeting this morning, and we were all just kind of looking at each other like, so what do we do? And we're 10 years in. We're not like old, but it's not like it's new. And it was just like, and I love planning and strategizing and doing goals and objectives and having all that stuff laid out. But right now it's like the goal is to be here in a year.
Yeah. That's the goal. Survive.
Yeah. So
I think we're in a homeostasis right now. I mean, we're in a spot where we just need to tread water. And when church planners, you have all sorts of giving assumptions that you need to meet that, like from our church, for church planners, you can't meet those giving assumptions because you're projecting at least some level of growth. And not to be vain or think it's all about growth or anything like that. But anytime you run a business, you have to project, and when you're setting budget, it's just facts. And so we're not able to even progress towards those giving projections. And so what does 2021 look like? Because, we do our fiscal year at 2020 starting in January. It's like, well, we have no idea what it's going to look like. And so launching into that, you can't project anything. You don't know how much money you need to raise. You can't get a space most likely in most cities. And if you do get a space and you lock into a lease, you might have to shut it down in the come winter time. So you just you can't really do anything. I think it's prudent to wait.
Yeah, dude, I got to share this with you. So we meet in a school. Right. So even if we don't even have a space to go to, even if we were allowed.
Same.
And so I want to share this with a fellow person who lives in a place like San Francisco that's notoriously expensive. That's even more expensive than here. We found a space that we could rent that would be big enough for our church. So our ideal is like 600 seats is what we'd want, right? And Boulder, which is kind of asking too much to begin with. And so I think you'll appreciate this. So we do the whole tour. We walk around. I'm like, man, this would give us room for growth and we could have it. And I was like, all right, let's get down to numbers. And they're like, well, I think we're really going to need 110,000. And I was like, okay. I go, okay. And he goes, a month.
There's no chance you're getting that, right?
No, there's none. And I was just like, when he said 110,000, I was like, well, we could probably pull that off in a year.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's high, but, and then he goes, no, a month. And it was one of those moments when you're dealing with like a developer and I'm clearly a pastor. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to leave. Like, I got nothing else to say.
I feel stupid right now. Yeah. Like, I'm just going to go ahead and walk out of here. There's a church in San Francisco that pays, they're downtown Soma. One of the most expensive parts of the United States. Yeah. He pays $45,000 a month. And so to hear something which is, in quite honestly, even in San Francisco, asinine. But to hear someone charge 110 grand a month in Boulder, and they think, what do they want in there? An AMC theater? Who's going to pay that? A Walgreens? I don't know.
I don't know either, man. But I was just like, I was dying. Yeah. But most of the stuff we look at, it's in that like 30 to 50 range. And I'm like, oh gosh. Like,
reasonable
even then I'm
for
like,
a church your size.
Yeah, but still even like, oh my gosh. So, oh man. Anyways, well, church planting, it's a ride.
Right.
So Eddie, talk to me a little bit, share, one of my, maybe let's do this. I'll lay out a little bit of my journey and then you chat on the physical fitness side. So, I come from a family that, is fairly athletic. My stepfather played professional baseball and that kind of led into what I wanted to do. And, you talked about how every 18-year-old wants to be a professional football player. That was kind of my dream for baseball. It didn't work out. And then led me to trying to be I had a failed attempt at a professional skiing career. I was professional, but in kind of that single person sports world, that means like you win like a Red Bull cooler. And like if you win a competition, and I had that realization that like, I'm not good enough to make enough money, doing this kind of thing. But it led to this whole thing, kind of a bit of a physical fitness journey for me that's been somewhat up and down. Because when I kind of got out of doing that stuff, I think I forgot for a long time all the training and effort that I was putting in to stay on the top of my game. And it's funny, we were talking about moving to Little Rock, planning a church. Man, I just ballooned up in weight, got super unhealthy. And it wasn't until like the last couple of years, I was like, this is ridiculous. I've got to do something here. You know what I mean? Like, I think people have those moments. Like you have a picture of you with your kids at the beach and you're like, do I really look like that?
Everybody's got one of those.
Right. And those kinds of things. And so, it's become a pretty important part of my family's life now. But this is something that's been a passion for you for a long time, and so much so that now you've launched your whole company. So talk a little bit about the journey to getting to where you are and what you're hoping to do.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think for me, I think the idea that, I come from a family where most of the family members were pretty unhealthy, and grew up the typical, 80s and 90s microwave era, Pop-Tarts, corn dogs, top ramen, the whole deal, right? We all, that was kind of the thing in the early 90s. That's how you ate. Yeah. So, I'd be a 10-year-old kid and my dinner is a couple boxes of mac and cheese and hot dogs cut in it and just this horrifying stuff. So anyway, not to say that's not great for you or somebody else. I'm just saying, my
it's
goodness.
Not.
So,
it's not.
I am saying that. Yeah. So what I'm thinking, so my development is, as I get to 13 or 14 years old, I felt like, okay, I can't eat like this if I ever want to play football. So I started, in 1999 going on like bodybuilding.com and tnation.com, like meathead websites, trying to figure out how do I gain weight so I can play football. Yeah. And so I spit my first protein shake into the sink because it's just so disgusting, for my 13-year-old self to try to drink. And so my journey ever since then has really been like, okay, how do I perform at a high level with my diet? And so I started thinking like that. And then as I got into high school football and college football, and I played basketball, ran track and those sort of things, I'm trying to figure out how to hack my body so I can perform as best I can as an athlete. Well, getting into the NFL, you get exposed to some of the world-class dietitians, nutritionists, trainers, strength coaches in the world. You get to see some of the best of the best of the best. And then they also bring in some world-class trainers and nutritionists as well. And so I get to get exposed to all these thought processes and these methods. And so I'm just taking a really interest in all of this stuff. Well, as I get out of football, I've had 4 surgeries in 5 years. I had ACL surgery, I had a couple back surgeries, I fractured my ankle, I had a lot of different surgeries. But all of this stuff about CTE comes out, and chronic inflammation, and all of these different things in your body, and how players are getting beat up and gaining weight and whatever it is, diabetic. And I just feel like I just don't want that to happen to me. I know my family history. I understand what I just did to my body was for sure not a good thing, playing football and hitting your head up against other people. And so I want to make sure I reduce as much possibility of me getting chronically ill as possible. And then it kind of unlocked this journey for me as a Christian of what it actually, actually the Bible has the story arc of the Bible, rather, with the fall of man and then the ultimate restoration. It really has a lot to say about the way we the way we treat our bodies, and modern Western foods and the way we produce them and the way we've synthesized them doesn't really align with the way of Scripture. It aligns with capitalism, it aligns with production, it aligns with making money and mass producing, but it doesn't really align with the way God always intended us to treat our bodies. And so as a result, as I'm looking at it, I'm thinking, okay, most of the world's chronically diseased. Chronic disease is basically, things like hypertension, Alzheimer's, diabetes, potential stroke, heart attack, things like that. And 1 in 2 Americans has chronic disease. And so that means I have a 50% chance of having a chronic disease. I don't want a chronic disease. So how can I best fight this? And, as I discovered, it really just aligns with the way I see Scripture and the story arc of the Bible. So I don't know how much more you want me to talk. I can basically talk for the next hour. So I'm just going to stop there and let you go into it.
No, you're good, man. You're good. I think that's important because, we do have in Scripture a response to taking care of ourselves, and even just thinking through the practical theological implications of the Imago Dei, right? That we are created in the image of God, that shouldn't be wasted at any level, because that's such a big concept, right? It informs, like we've already talked about, the idea of race, right? That image bearers, that there is no lower level of ethnicity or race there, but there is a responsibility that everybody carries to themselves as an image bearer of God. So we'll riff off that a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny because I think pastors and maybe even Christians at large, there's nothing a pastor doesn't care about. A pastor is, particularly in our, in our vertical, so to speak, our tribe, we analyze everything theologically. So we might look at politics, you analyze it theologically. You look at vehicles, you look at coveting, you look at buying things and money and profits and watches and preachers and sneakers and whatever else we're looking at. We go, well, what does that theologically make sense that a pastor has $300 shoes, right? Well, the one thing we don't ever look at theologically is eating. We almost never look at that theologically. It's like the one area that we allow the culture to take the lead on, and we never give our input in, unless it's vanity, where we've got someone who is maybe an Instagram model or a bodybuilder, and they're just ripped. We go, wow, geez, I wonder if their body is their idol. But we've got things like, even gluttony is like the one overlooked ministry sin. It's like that. Who knows what the line is, to eat all things in moderation. And by the way, we quote that like that's in the Bible. Like I'm flipping through my Bible, like 1 Corinthians 9:6 is all things in moderation. It's not. That is a modern Western cultural biases. So anyway, as we're looking at it, we think there's our body is a temple. Paul isn't saying our body is a temple. We should take care of our body as a temple, sex is not good. Therefore, our body is a temple. Right? We want to have sex within the context of marriage. Yeah. He's saying, no, our body is a temple. Therefore, we should not defile the body. Right? So taking that principle can bleed over into so many different areas, and it certainly bleeds over into taking care of the body. Because if your body is made in the image and likeness of God, you have a responsibility to steward that body well. And the pastor answer is, well, I don't want to become vain in my thinking, and we
Mm.
always fall off the other side of the ship, which is lack of stewardship. So it's a double-edged sword. Of course, you don't want to be a vain meathead, but you also don't want to neglect your body.
Yeah, bro. Here. Okay, I'm gonna mess with you. And if you're like, Matt, I am not going there. You
Okay.
tell me. I'll get in trouble. How's this? I don't buy the vain argument at all because everybody wants to look good. Like, like you want to walk in and your wife see you and be like, "Yep, that's mine." Like every pastor should want that. Like I don't want to go outside and be like, "Oh, I got to suck it in," if I take off my shirt at the beach. Nobody
Okay.
wants that. I don't buy it. I just don't
Well,
buy it.
it would be one thing if most of
Yeah.
us were just average looking Joes, but most of
Yeah.
us, are just too heavy. Most of us are way closer to bodily neglect than we are vanity. And
Yeah.
yet vanity is like the thing we're trying to avoid. So yeah, you're right. And also you should probably try to keep your spouse and hope that she keeps her covenants, because you're 65 pounds heavier than you were when you got married.
Yeah. I don't buy the whole like the dad bod is in thing. I'm like some overweight dude invented that.
Yeah, no, that's a lie. That's Russia, dude. They hacked us, and there's just no way.
I knew it. It had to do something with that. It's Putin.
Yeah, seriously.
All right. So, okay, somebody's listening right now and they're going like, all right, where do I I see Rob Lohman just commented over here. Okay, fine. Off to the gym I go, which way to go, Rob. But
Nice, buddy.
but you're not just saying just the gym, right? Like
Right.
so far you haven't talked about the gym at all.
No.
All you said is food.
Yeah, I think that's where you have to start, because I think there's a biblical case for understanding eating well.
Mm-hmm.
You have to start there. But I think that first, even thinking biochemically, what your body is going to look like and feel like is 85 to 90% what you eat. It is almost I don't want to say very little to do with you moving around, but that's almost always where we go. And that really comes from the 1980s and the Jane Fonda and the Richard Simmons movement, where we thought we've got to out-train a bad diet. Well, you're never going to be able to out-train a bad diet. It all begins with how you're going to eat and what you're putting in your mouth. And I think, so going back and thinking big picture about this, let's just think about the concept of the fall of man. Think about the idea that the relationship between God and man becomes fractured, and that the ground, thorns and thistles, are produced out of it. And now for man to be able to work, it's going to be very difficult. So as we go to do agriculture, we start getting creative and we think of things that allow us to produce crops at a higher level, because thorns and thistles are difficult. Yep. So we think of different chemicals and pesticides to be able to get rid of weeds and to get rid of bugs, and then we genetically modify foods so that way those foods won't be attacked by different bugs. And then we think about shrinking our wheat because it's easier to cut down and it's easier to move and it's easier to produce that way. And then we think about modifying different oils and using different oils to be able to put these wheat together. Yeah. But in order to use different oils, you've got to remove the naturally occurring thing that happens to oil, which it goes rancid. And so they bleach the oil, and then they use chlorine in the oil so it doesn't smell. So oftentimes we're eating modern bread. We're eating bread that is actually made with rancid vegetable canola or sunflower oil. And so we're eating bad junk food for our bodies. And so we think that the bread that Jesus ate and the bread that we eat today was the same. Well, Jesus ate bread, I eat bread. Well, no, Jesus didn't eat Wonder Bread and Iron Kids bread. Yeah. He ate good, ancient, high quality grain. And today we eat this like Franken food that we invented, which is from the fall of man. Like, we got involved in God's creation and we created something that tastes good, but is destroying our body. So we really do have to start with what you're eating, not how much you work out, and then go from there.
Yeah. So going off that, we're both pastors and we care for people. One of the critiques I hear on eating well is that I can't afford it. Mm-hmm. Right. And I don't know. I mean, I can admit my privilege to a point that I have a good job and I can eat pretty much what I want, and I can do that. But what if we really are having a problem with that in our nation and in our world? a big part of that can be income. I don't know if you've thought about that. And if I'm going off script a little bit, but it just popped into my head. But I think that is a barrier where some people, whether it's an excuse or a reality, I'm not here to
Mhm.
tell people where they are, but a lot of people go,
Sure.
man, well, eat healthy just sounds expensive.
Yeah. Agreed. And okay, there's a few things there. So you have to think about the idea of marketing. That marketing has crept
Mm.
in, and it has kind of trained us to believe that going and getting a number 6 at Wendy's is somehow cheaper than eating a cooked meal at home. And the truth is, if you order if you order chicken, rice, and salad at a restaurant, you're going to pay $17. And if you order the cheeseburger, it's like $9.99. So
Yeah.
there's that like mental thing in your head, like, oh, Applebee's charges more for healthier food.
Yeah.
But the reality is, it's not actually true. While junk food is somewhat cheaper
Yeah.
because it's genetically modified and produced to be cheaper,
Yeah.
the long-term cost is significant. You're going to be paying for that in medical bills much later in your life,
Yep.
when you're placed on statin drugs for cholesterol, and when you're placed on heart medication, all this stuff. But it's actually not that expensive to buy a bag of rice for $3, and to buy lettuce from a farmer's market, and to buy eggs from a farmer's market really cheap. And then chicken is also very cheap as well. You can get pork very cheaply. So the truth is, it's not more expensive. It just tastes better, and it's also cheap. And if we really did our research, we realized that a bag of rice can feed a family for a long time. If you're getting like jasmine rice, or you're getting black beans, and you're ordering lettuce, it just doesn't sound as good as the number 6.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. As you're talking, I was thinking of one of our mentors who's invested in both of us, John Bryson, JB. He always had the statement, "What you don't pay for now, you will pay for later."
That's right. Good word.
And that's right there with it. I think of my wife. She comes from a Greek family, and so it's all home cooking. It's all making your own bread, and I can attest that she probably saves us money by kind of that. She's become friends with. I would say check out, depending on your context. Like my wife has become friends with the local lady at the Mediterranean market, who gets certain things in. There's ways to do that. And be creative. Like buying a giant bag of basmati rice is not a investment.
It's not going to break your bank. Well, and what's going back to kind of our original conversation about doing life in different spaces. Like if you're white, like go to an ethnic grocery store, like an Asian market or a Latino market, and you're going to find their produce is so much cheaper than walking into like a Safeway or Kroger's or something. So one of the hacks we do is we go to Latino market and we buy some meat from them. It's high quality meat, and we get some of the vegetables. It's so much cheaper, and you get better stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm actually taking my son hunting for the first time this fall, with the goal of like, I want you to have that experience. And I'm not trying to turn into Joe Rogan here or anything where it's like all you do is eat elk, but there's something beautiful about learning some of these skills that we can learn. But yeah, for sure.
Amen.
Okay, so you're eating well. To talk about the actual fitness part, because I think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the expert here, not me, is that there's something to be said for physical fitness and diet, how they go hand in hand. And what I've learned is if I'm working out regularly, if I'm doing something, I don't want to eat crap food nearly as much, because then I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, and I think you can feel it more, like if I've eaten well before a workout versus if I haven't taken care of myself. Like maybe I was like on vacation and had a few too many margaritas around the pool, and then I come back to the gym and I'm like, oh, it's not great,
Well, yeah, no, it's compounding, but think about like one of the common things I get when I, with the Ex Nihilo channel on YouTube is that people will say, well, Jesus never talked about exercise, and so why do I have to exercise? And you have to think about, okay, context of first century, the first century Middle East. Yeah. They didn't consider exercise an issue. So they didn't live sedentary lifestyles. They didn't sit in front of lap computers all the time. They didn't commute at 45 minutes each way to